So we adopted, over time, we've made some changes. We adopted custom functions. A few years back, we shifted to using JSON for parameter passing. Back in FileMaker, in Modular FileMaker 1.0, we said, hey, just use let. Just use the let function to pass data from parameter to parameter, from script to script, because it's native. It didn't require custom functions. And I called it the custom function wars. It's like every developer had their finely tuned custom functions for passing multiple parameters to a script. And you'd end up, if you shared code, you'd end up with lots of different versions of the thing that was doing the exact same thing. So we said, hey, just use the let statement and make parameters, basically let functions, and just use native FileMaker to do it. So there's a heavy emphasis on native FileMaker. We now have something better, right? What's that thing we have now? What's better for passing multiple parameters? JSON, yeah. So importantly, everything I'm going to talk about is going to require FileMaker 16 or later. I wrote a blog post when 16 came out. It basically said this changes everything. And some of it was obvious and some of it was more subtle, but the thing that really changed everything was JSON. We are still just beginning to uncover the usefulness of having native JSON parsing in FileMaker. One of the obvious ones is that we now use the same data structure to pass data around that everybody else in the world uses, basically. All web services today at least have JSON as an option. So we got insert from URL, we got a bunch of these other things that just made it sort of obvious that this is what we should be doing. So we got JSON. This was Modular FileMaker 1.0. So clearly it's dated, right? Everybody agree that we need to make some changes to what's going on here? Anybody want to stay where we're at and not move? Nobody wants to raise? Really? Part of what I set out to do in this talk was to just sort of come up with what some of the new guidelines would be, maybe some of the new ideas that might give us a way forward with all this new stuff that we have. And I wanted to do a new website. And then Robert came along last night and showed this really cool module sharing thing, and I just said, I want that now. So I built something last night, which I'm going to show you in a second, that it's not where we're headed with all this stuff, with the XML representation of schema and being able to inject stuff is really, really awesome. But we can do some of that now. How many people have used our tool generator? So generating code, right? And so one of the ways we're able to do that is we generate XML and put it on the clipboard using the Base Elements plugin, which is awesome, by the way. It's really the only plugin that we use anymore is Base Elements. One of the main reasons we do is because we can use it to write code. So one of the things I want to include in the new guidelines for Modular FileMaker is that we should optimize for code generation. So last time it was optimizing for sharing, and we still need to do that, but we should also optimize for code generation. As you saw, we are soon going to have the tools, even without a plugin, and without the clipboard, to natively start altering our files with scripts. So scripts that write scripts, right? Code that writes code. And there's a huge advantage to that, and I hope I can show you some of those things. Here's what I'm going to do. I want to build a module, and we're going to do it from scratch, brand new file. And I'm going to talk you through how we think about using Modular FileMaker today, and how we think about organizing our modules in terms of creating a new feature for our systems or for something that we want to share on Modular FileMaker or something else. All right. I'm writing up some stuff here. So this is a new website, Modular FileMaker 2.0. I wrote this last night. This is, so a couple of interesting things. Another couple of interesting things that have changed since 2013 is that we have the FileMaker Server Data API, which is a really nice way to exchange data with things like web pages and other tools, right? So we have this really modern RESTful API that we can write all kinds of things for, including websites. So I'm proposing that the new Modular FileMaker website and repository be backed by a FileMaker database. So this is actually, if you think about what that means that it's got to be able to take a pretty heavy load because people are going to be searching in the module repository. They're going to be searching all the time, right? They're going to be looking up this stuff. So if it's in a FileMaker database, it's going to have to take a pretty heavy load. But I think we can actually do that now. It's one of the things that I'm very excited about is that with the proper cloud infrastructure, using FileMaker database as a store to a publicly high traffic website, I think is actually quite doable now. We've done it for some of the other tools and products that we have, and it works. You have to do some caching, and that's pretty much how most of the internet runs, actually, is on caching. The first rule of having a high traffic website that's backed by a database is don't hit the database. That's like really what it is. Like, do not hit the database, right? So one of the things we can do now is if you think about publishing a module, it's not going to happen very often. So when somebody puts a new module or a new version up, it doesn't need to be live that second. So all we have to do is simply cache the query results, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever, and suddenly we have everybody who's doing a search, they're all using the same cached blob of data that comes back, and it's only getting updated about every half hour. So now we can do this kind of stuff. Because FileMaker is adopting standards around REST and things like that, the tools to put a cache in front of the FileMaker Data API are really quite simple to use. You got to know about them. You got to learn how to either get them from a service or install them or whatever. But they're not hard. So anyway, so we're going to build. So this is the new repo as it stands today. Don't have a lot in there yet, but we've got a couple of things that are kind of interesting. We got nice type ahead search. All right, see how fast that is? That's pretty sweet, right? Notice those really chill animations that come in as the thing comes back. Watch that nice fade in, right? That's beautiful. So this is built using HTML, modern front-end JavaScript stuff, and it connects beautifully to a FileMaker server to do all this. And by the way, the FileMaker server that this is running on I think it's in LA. I'm sorry, the database is in LA. I'm running some of the stuff locally here because I need to just kind of do a little hand waving to pull this off. But so here's some interesting things though. You notice these XML things here? So these are kind of interesting. Let me make sure I have everything open that I need. Remember I talked about tooling. So tooling is really, really awesome. It doesn't matter how fast your development platform is. You using it, a computer's faster. So the ability to have tools that can write and handle some of the tedium of building and maintaining a solution is really, really valuable. So this is called MFM. You can probably guess what that stands for. And let's take a look at it. So we're going to start a brand new from scratch. So I have nothing up my sleeves. So we're going to write a notification module. So we'll write this thing, we'll call it notification. All right, I'm going to close this for now. If I can close it, there we go. So the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need some custom functions in here because now that they're everywhere, they're really everywhere. But check this out. So these are custom functions. I want these error functions. And what these error functions are is they're just a way of when you do something and you want to check for the error, it packages it up at JSON, and it's a really convenient way to pass that error to something that's going to handle it or log it, right? So again, now that we have JSON, we can start to create structured data like error objects. We call them error objects. So it tracks a bunch of information about where the error occurred, in what script, in what file, the accounts that's logged in, and all that stuff can be packaged in a JSON object. So we have some custom functions that make that super easy. So I found on the Modular FileMaker site the FM error functions. Woohoo! So I've got my FM error functions there. What do? So this is at MFM, and I don't know if you noticed what happened there. This is a web page, right? XML. This is now a FileMaker file. So what just happened is when I clicked that button, this file was pulled to the front, and the XML representation of the error functions was downloaded into this database. And here and then it parses them out. Again, this is using base elements for the magic and all of the XML processing and the clipboard management is all handled by base elements. But now, so all I have to do is click this copy all, and I get this this is what we're going to build, by the way, this notification module. It tells me it's on the clipboard, so now I just go into Manage Custom Functions, and I paste. And there are my custom functions. Okay? No longer wondering where the latest copies are, right? This is the problem. This is one of the reasons why I hated custom functions was that it was just so hard to manage. You'd have, especially in a large multi-file system, you could have you know, you have a custom function like we have here, custom function called error, and it was supposed to be the same in every file, but in 1 out of 10 it was different. And now you get this weird bug, and you're like, I don't know what's the matter with the thing. It's supposed to use the error function. The error function's like this. I look at it in this file, it's like that. I look, oh, that one's broken. That one's out of date, right? So managing custom functions was a major pain in the butt. So we have another thing, which this is a very simple solution. It's only got a few custom functions in it right now, but in the interest of time, let's just do something else here. Let's make a little DDR. Database design report, DDR. And let's just get notifications. We'll copy, and we'll leave that closed, and we'll go to the desktop. And I got DDRs in here, but let me make a new folder. Okay, so here's some, so we're just going to, it'll be very fast. There's nothing in there, just custom functions. But use your powers of imagination to think that we've got those custom functions spread out amongst a large set of files, like an old legacy set or even a new set. And now the question is, well, are they all the same, right? Are they all the same? How do you know? How do you know? Anybody have any ways that they do that now? Thank you. I promise I did not pay that person. I can't even see who it is because I don't have my glasses on. But even FM perception doesn't yet tell you the unique, whether or not the calculation in that custom function is exactly the same. You have to do a couple extra steps. We have a file which you can download that will do that. And so one of the things we've done here with this is we have this scanner. Let's see if this works. So we're going to bring in the summary. And so here are those. So what that did is it scanned the DDR and pulled in just the custom functions. But if this was a multi-file solution, notice that in the second column we have different instances. So what this can actually do is it compares the calculation in every file across the system. So if you had more than one instance, it would say 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. So you would know instantly that you have custom functions that are not in sync. That may not sound like a big deal, but it can be the source of really subtle bugs that can take forever to track down. Part of what we want to do with my focus in Modular FileMaker moving forward is really around creating consistency, creating things that we know work and that we know we can use quickly and easily. So this is another way. So MFM will have a bunch of other utility functions in it, but it will be, this is just for custom functions in this case, but we can add other things too, which will help to ensure that the quality of the code is consistent across multi-file systems, etc. Another thing we can do is now that we have a repo of these things, I'm going to I'll tell you right now, this is fake, but you can get the idea that we could check this and it can actually scan the repo. Because we have an authoritative system that has the authoritative copy of the error custom functions. And it knows the version. So we can now actually scan that, go up and ask the repo, hey, is there another version of this error function? And if there is, guess what? We can download it. We end up back at our clip browser, and everything is, we're right back to here, and we now can go and update our custom functions. So we've got a couple options here. We can copy all, but once they're in place, that's not very useful because currently we cannot update these dynamic, automatically with the XML functions we don't yet have, but we saw are coming at some point in the future. So eventually, this button, instead of saying copy all, will simply say update across all of my files, update. But for now, we have to do things like copy the calculation so that we can go in to each of the files that we have and paste in that updated calc. So does this seem like a cool thing? This is, obviously, as I wrote this last night, it's somewhat beta. Somewhat, maybe alpha is a better term for that. But this is the direction I want to go in. I want to, so again, we're going to be backed by FileMaker. I think we can build an infrastructure that will handle the millions of users that will hit this thing, right? Aspirational, right? Or aspirational. But I really do believe we can do it. So I want this to become a showcase for what's possible with FileMaker. Because we tell our customers there's very little that we can't accomplish. Whatever your dream is with FileMaker, we can do it. We can do a lot of this stuff now. Because FileMaker 16 gave us access to JSON, insert from URL, gave us the data API, and is giving us more and more standards and We saw the stuff that's coming last night. Because of that, we feel pretty confident that if you have a problem and it's not competing against Amazon, we can do it. Like, I'm serious, we can do it. You need scale. You need to be able to have 100,000 people interact with your database. Well, we'll build a web page to do that because we need to use caching and things like that. But we can do it. So I want this to become a showcase for how to build FileMaker. So the back end of it. So where you go to enter your modules will be FileMaker. You'll just go to the FileMaker site, and because we're not going to have 10,000 module authors yet. You've got FileMaker. You can go and use FileMaker to enter your module information and upload your versions. And by the way, we'll do version tracking here, so you can have multiple versions available. But just in terms of what I'd like to do, this is the direction. And I hope you're all are happy with it. And so happy that you're going to come and help me do it. So that sound good? All right. Okay, let's write some code. So we brought in those functions. I'm going to bring in the validation functions. I don't know if we'll have time to use them, but maybe we will. So I'll bring those in as well. Now look, I've got my copy all. I go over here. Boom. Whoops, wait for that to disappear. There we go. Manage custom functions. I'm so waiting for that just update thing, But there we go. So we've got pretty much all the custom functions I'm going to need here. So what I want to build basically is this thing, right? Basically that. That's the module we're going to build, is this feature. I want to make a little tiny notification module. All right, so how do we do it? Let's start in, I still think that scripts are a really great place to describe your modules in terms of where some of the core logic is and where the documentation for some of it is, just because we get lots of good organization tools there. We don't really have great organization tools in custom functions. It's just one long list. But in scripts, we can actually create some structure that gives some meaning to what we do. So we're going to start, just like Modular FileMaker 1.0, we're going to start not with a script. I was thinking new folder, but there we go. So we have our generic modules folder. So this is where this is going to go because it's a generic module. It's not, we're making a notifications module, a feature that can potentially be used in any database, right? Not just this one. So it's going to go in our module folder. The way we do this was not something we documented originally with MFM1, but we actually have two more top-level folders. So I keep hitting Command-N. Let's do that. So we have something we call the file module. And then we have the application. That is going to become a thing with me. Command-N. And I mean new folder. Doesn't everybody know Command-N means new folder? It does to me. All right. So then we have application modules. All right, so what do I mean by these different things here? So a file module, we pretty much, in every solution we build, we end up needing some little bit of maintenance around the file. Like, I need to be able to save a copy as a script, or I want to have a place to hook all of my system startup things into the on first window open script. So that's where we usually put them in the file module. And so that would be things like on first window open, right? So this is where we attach logic to the file itself. And it's turned out to be quite useful for us to have that separate. Application modules are modules that are specific to the application that you're building. So this has the subject matter that you're talking about. If it's a contact system, this is where the modules that you build that are for your contact system would be. And we pretty much put everything in one of these three folders. At least that's their initial destination, or their final destination. Sometimes they move between folders, and sometimes we have a work in progress folder when we're not exactly sure what it's going to be, and we'll put things in there. But what this gives us is just some really nice consistency about what each of these areas are for. If it's in the module folder, we know that that should be a generic module that's not particularly tied to this file. We use it in this file, but it's not designed for this applications, for all applications. Make sense so far? So we're going to do a lot of work in this module one because that's where we're at. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a notification folder in here. And so this is going to become our let's call it, let's change that name a little bit. Not delete. Let's call this notify. It sounds cooler. All right, notify. Okay, so inside the modules folder you find modules. Then they are named after the folder that they're in at that next level down. Inside of here, we found this to be really useful. We had a few different ways of talking about this in the beginning, but we found basically 3 levels of folders that are really good here. And the first one is public. And the next one is, we call it config. And the final one we call private. So you'll see how we use these in a minute, but just to talk them through for a second, usually just at the bottom somewhere. Really hard to get that in there. There we go. Nope. One more. There we go. Okay. So config, public, and private. So as a module author, you're writing some code that you don't expect other people to see. Right? It's stuff that you're writing the module, other people are going to use the module. So that's the kind of code that goes in private. So things that you don't want people to look at, right? Either because you're embarrassed or because it's difficult or complex or whatever. So you hide that away. So those are the implementation details. And we call it private to signify that unless you're the module author or unless you are working on this module, you don't need to look here. Not important. This I find to be a really hard concept for FileMaker developers because we're so used to getting into everything. And when I'm teaching this to new people, they go, but I want to look in there. Fine, go ahead and look. Just go. But just remember that in terms of how we're laying out this module, the intent is that you shouldn't need to know what's going on in there to use this module. And if you do, that means you haven't really finished the module, basically. Make sense so far? So config is, this is where you put scripts that in order to use this module, they need to be edited. This is how you are configuring the module for use in this particular instance. So these are scripts that the module implementer, the person who puts it into the file, is going to need to edit. And public are the scripts that are the only scripts that get called from outside of the module. And if you think about it, that's really the only three things that happen. Right? You edit a script, you call a script, or you edit and then in terms of this private one, if you're the module author, you just hide away all that stuff. There's nothing, I don't come across any behavior that can't be described in one of those three instances. In our case, what we want to do is we would like to create a script. And sometimes we break these out into subfolders that might be called API and in the public folder. And what we're going to do is create a script in here called notify. And it's going to get some parameters. And we're going to keep this pretty simple. But this is a naming convention that we use, message and so notify, and then this is fine too. The idea being that the squirrely braces instead of the straight braces or the regular parentheses signifies this is JSON. Okay, this is the JSON object getting two properties, message and title. That is sort of the beginning, and that means somebody looking at that can get some idea of what happens. But we also really want to document how this works. So let me actually show this web page here real quick. We'll take a brief aside. So we have this thing called fmdocs, which is the way that we document scripts and custom functions and everything. It's based on JS docs, which is the way that JavaScript is documented in lots of other languages. I know it looks a little bit like code, and it might be a little scary at first, but it's really not that crazy. What we're looking at here is just a bunch of comments. We have up here a param, which means the parameter coming in is an object, which is JSON, basically, JSON object. You can think of it that way. And we call it user data. And then the next three parameters are actually describing the sub-properties of that object. So it's user data account name, and this is party and then party ID. So what you can describe the parameters pretty much of any level intensity that you want here. I'm just going to copy this to save a little bit of time. Oh, I can't actually, that won't work. See, I'm already thinking I can just inject stuff. So we're going to write this real quick, and I'll show you why we like to do this. So comment. So this is, you start a comment block with double like that, and then, you want to put a parameter. You want to describe the parameter. It's another block, and we go at param. And this is going to be an object because it's two parameters coming in. So we're just going to call this, we'll call it JSON. It's a JSON object. And call this object, and we name it JSON. You'll see why this works in a minute. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to denote that what comes in that JSON object is a string that is a message and another string, which is a title. So how many people are familiar with JavaScript documentation or JS docs or anything like that? It's not, I mean, I know it's not super common here in this community, and we're not saying, like, I don't really actually know whether this will be a firm part of the guidelines or not, but I think once you see what we can do with this, I think you guys will agree that it's worth looking at. So you can also put just some notes up here. You can say what this is going to do. It's going to spring a, show a message, right? Show a little notification message. All right, so this is pretty nifty. We're good, right? And then we close the block with that. We now know what this is for, and we know what to expect. Message and title. All right? And so we didn't invent this standard. I want to be very clear. This is not something we invented. We've just made a couple of minor adjustments to it to better fit the FileMaker, the FileMaker code. But this is pretty much the way most code that you will find anywhere else, if you get in a JavaScript or anything like that, is documented like this. So it's not something we invented. We're just using it, again, sort of in the interest of time. When it gets interesting is that so this is actually described what we're looking for perfectly. Like, it actually knows that we need JSON to come in. We need to get our JSON string, and it knows that it needs to be a message and a title property, and it knows that they need to be strings. So we've described this in a way that's human readable, but also in a way that is machine readable. So eventually, we're going to want to call this script, right? So we're going to want to call it. So what I'm going to do is in my application module up here, I'm going to make an example notification module. Notify. Example notify module. So this is kind of an interesting point. So we're going to make a module that uses notification, but we're going to write it as its own module, the example notification module. But I'm going to, in the interest of time, because I want to cruise through some of this stuff, I'm just going to keep it very simple and just write a script here. But so now I need to pass these parameters into this script. So how do I do that? I'm going to copy this block, and I'm going to open up a file I keep for this very purpose called generator. And some of you may have seen this, miscellaneous generators. So if you go over here, you can actually parse that script parameter that comes in based on the comment block. So if I click this, I think I used an older version. There shouldn't have been a dialog there, but let's see if that worked. Yeah, there we go. So we now just parsed that, okay? So by commenting it correctly, we now just parsed the property by simply using a little bit of tooling. If I want to call this script from another script, I go over here, set bar from comments, I go to my new script, and I paste, and now I have everything I need to build that JSON. What do you think? Does that seem useful? So we're doing this heavily in our Carbon framework. We have a lot of generators that actually look at your file and look at the schema that's in the file and write code for you so that you can do it faster and without a lot of errors. We find it very useful. And so, all right, so let's jam through and finish this out. So what are we going to do? We need a layout that is going to be our notification. So let's make a new layout. Let's call it notifier. And let's open it up. And let's make it kind of small here. So it'll be our little notification thingy. All right, we'll make it like a nice yellow color. All right. So I'm going to need to display the message that comes in here. Now you could use merge variables if you want. You can just put you can parse variables and put them right on the layout. I actually am not a fan of those. I find them to be kind of a pain to work with. I really like fields for this purpose. And because we've got this nice module here, I'm just going to go in, and in my notification table, I don't really need any of this stuff. But let's just make a couple global fields here for simplicity's sake. Message, text, options, storage, global. I can't see this, it's so small. And then we'll duplicate that, and we'll call this title. Okay, we got that, we're good. So let's just get rid of this. We'll put the title up top, we'll put the message down below. Just some quick little thinking here. All right. So now we have something that can display our message, which is kind of nice, right? So now we just need to go into this script, and this one's really simple, which is why I chose it. So we're going to set those fields. Because they're global fields, we can set them from here. We don't have to be on the layout first, and that's kind of nice in case we get any kind of flashing or anything like that. So this is going to be my message variable, and we're going to set that into the field, and then we're going to get title, and this is title. Okay? I'm going to zoom in on that, make sure everybody's clear on what we did. So we generated this code, which made that super easy, and then we're just going to set this into a field. Pretty simple, right? So one of the other big changes in FileMaker 16 was card windows. So card windows rock. Anybody agree? Everybody agree? Yeah. Card windows are awesome. And actually it's not, what's subtle about it is it's not just the card windows, because that was pretty cool, but the changes they had to make to get the card windows to work removed a couple of major pain in the butts just in the window stuff alone, right? Before card windows, if you wanted to open a little window, what did you have to do? First of all, not be on Windows, right? Because that wasn't fun. If you're on a Mac, maybe you could pull this off, make a new window, and that window would be on the layout that you were starting from with all of its script triggers firing as you landed there, right? And then it would show that window, and then you'd have to go to the window you wanted to show for your little pop-up, and then you'd have to resize it. So the experience was horrid. Everybody agree with that kind of thing? So it really meant that kind of utility window, it was nice, but it was ugly. So we just didn't do it. Card windows, of course, give us the way to embed it right in the nice screen with the dimming, but now we can actually open those windows and place them anywhere we want, and there's no flashing, there's no redrawing, and we can land on the layout we want to land on, right? So if we go new window, the first thing is we get to pick the layout, right? And so we can pick notifier. So we never, when this window script fires, we don't start on the window we're leaving. We don't start on that layout. We go directly to the new layout. There's no exit. There's no script triggers that fire. None of that happens. And the other nice thing, of course, is that if we make it a card window, which I'm going to do for simplicity's sake here, is we get all the sizing. It's just kind of perfect, right? It just kind of takes care of it for us. So let's remove some of this stuff. Oh, let's actually just make it a card window. And then we'll dim the parent window. Why not? And we'll leave the close button for a safety net in case we screw up. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep this simple. There's a few other things you have to do to make this like a little more robust. But just to make this simple, we're going to pause the script for a duration of 3 seconds, and then we're just going to close this window, right? This is a pretty nifty little module. Granted, this one's in just one script, right? Pretty easy. We're kind of done almost. But you can imagine that you might create a more complex API where you might have different types of layouts depending on what level of warning or notification you want it. If it's a warning, like a danger warning thing, you might go to a layout that's red and it's got a big stop sign on it or whatever, right? Or you might go to one that's green if you just want to show success, or yellow for warning, or whatever. Or you might want to add buttons to it that people can respond to and do things. So you can think about how you could make this very, very complex. And you'd end up with something where some of this stuff that you're going to want to write here, you're going to want to just put it in here. You're going to want to put it away so that people don't have to mess with that. And then you create these really simple API scripts that oftentimes just do this. Oop, I don't want that. I want... And really, it's just going to pass in the script parameter, right? Get script parameter, right? So what we do is you have this little API script. This becomes what the people publicly see, and it does nothing but pass through the results, and then pass through the exit script with the get script results. So this can actually be useful. So what you've done is you've created a nice simple API here, which is going to be our notify API, and then here what we like to do is just put a little underscore in front of that, and we hide this away because maybe this is super ugly and we don't want this here, right? So then what we'll do is, so people can see this, we'll take this comment out and we'll put it in here, and this becomes what we call an API script that hides away some complexity in the private scripts. Does that make sense? Now let's try to use this thing. So let's make some messages. Let's say, yay, DevCon. Oh, I didn't want to do that. We'll just keep it simple here. Awesome power. I have awesome power. So we've set our message title. This guy, which was generated for us. Let me zoom in on this. So this again was generated. I didn't have to write this, which is kind of nice, right? I generated this script based on the comments. So that's just going to take the message and package it up in the title. Boom, right? So and then we're going to call our script. And what do we know? Like now I'm a user of this module, right? So I'm not the developer, I'm the user. So where do I go in here? Where do I go? Public, API, notify, right? And I pass in my parameters. What did I call them? I called it JSON. And by the way, did you notice that it was smart enough based on the documentation, to name this JSON? That actually came from the fact that in our thing, we call that first object JSON. So it's able to look at this, analyze, and come up with a really nice readable code for you to use. One of the things that a lot of developers can get into the habit of doing is make these really crazy abstractions because they don't want to type. How many people have done that? I've done it. Some of you might have seen Master Detail from me a few years back. Super over-engineered in many ways, right? Just so much stuff going on. And it was really just so that we could dump it into something really quickly, but it was really hard to maintain. So our emphasis now is more on generating code to remove the need to do a lot of tedious tasks. The advantage to that is that the code you generate is much easier to maintain. It's not some bizarre abstraction that you will not remember 6 months down the road. Does that make sense? So I'd encourage all of you to think about, you saw what's coming. You can start to play with these tools now. You take a look at Generator, take a look at base elements using the clipboard manager to kind of get a feel for what you can do to take advantage of code that writes code. So is this going to work? What do you guys think? What are the odds? I don't know. Let's try it. Anybody have it? Somebody tell me something? Did I make a bug? I'm calling the wrong script. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are the best. So I'm using my example, right? This is my example, so I'm going to call this example script. And I should, let's not make it an X sign. That's not a good omen. Let's do, we don't have a little chat, but we do. Kind of, that's close chat, right? It's kind of neat. So let's see. I'm not brave enough to do without debugger, so let's do debugger. Oops, I just ran it all the way through, and I didn't even see what happened. Anybody see it? Let's see. So we got our message. Let's bring up the data viewer, right? See if I can zoom this up a little bit. So there's our JSON all packaged up. Let's see, let's get it into here. And it should just pass it on through. There we go. So there's the thing, and then it disappears. Boom, right? So look at that. Right. What's extra special about this particular thing is that you can actually use this module from another file. And because card windows, how many people, this blew me away. In fact, I did not believe it the first time that I saw this. But how many people are familiar with the concept of a card window from another file being embedded in the current file? Not a lot, so you guys are in for a treat. So we're going to make another file real quick, and then we're going to go into questions. So let's see. So we're going to make another create new. Number 2. Okay. So I'm not going to do anything here. This is just going to have a script on it. And I'm just going to call my example script to make the case. So here's the thing. Card windows mount to the frontmost window, not the window that the layout is defined in. Does that make sense? Those of you who haven't seen this before? So what does that mean? That means that if I want to We can just use a single step here, actually, can't we? I'll have to make a file. I'll have to make a connection to that. I'm going to call this example script just to keep it a little simple so we can get to questions. So all I've done is called that script. We know when that script runs, a card window pops up. The thing that blew me away was that when you do that, it shows up here. Okay? That window, there's no notification layout in this file. Okay? But yet we see it perfectly here, right? So what this means is that now with the window management we have, it seems perfectly reasonable and actually quite awesome to be able to create generic modules like notification things, contact pickers, calendar widgets that exist in another file. And you never actually pull them into your file, all right? That's the best solution. Why? Because when a new version comes out, you just drop it in. So I think so Modular FileMaker moving forward, we're going to recognize a full file module as a thing and something that you can do. And when you do it, it's really awesome. How many people have built full file modules? John did this awesome calendar. Let me show you this awesome calendar here that John did. And then we're going to open it up. We're going to do questions. So because I think I have about 10 minutes left, yeah? Whoops, wrong one. I need to open this one. So check this thing out. So this is, look at this, beautiful picker. Right? Pick dates. Changes the date. There's a lot of other awesome functionality he's got into here, and I don't really have time to go into it. But the point is that you don't need to move this into your solution. You can just use it as a separate file. And the other thing that's different is that now there's no shared hosting. So you can't say, well, I can't use another file because I'm only allowed one file on my server. That's no longer allowed. Shared hosting is out. So your server is your server. You can have 125 files in that thing if you want. So why not just have these simple little utility functions? I really can't think of a downside, frankly, for having them. Now with some of the automation tools that are out there, installing these and moving them around is super simple. Card modules or just separate file modules are a thing, and I think they're a really useful thing, and you should be on the lookout for where you can develop centralized functionality in your systems that you can move into a card or into another file. And you can use them as cards or just as regular pop-up windows. They work great too, all throughout your system, and maintain that in one small place. And then you can share it. You can put it up on the new Modular FileMaker website, and eventually, my hope is that you'll be able to install those directly off of the Modular FileMaker website onto your server. I think we can pull this off. So this is the kind of tooling I'm hoping to do with Modular FileMaker 2.0. We've got about 8 minutes left. First of all, thank you all for coming. I hope that was interesting and useful. And I'm happy to take your questions, but please come. There's some microphones in the room, so please come up to the microphones if you can so everybody can hear your question.
That was awesome, thanks. On the FM docs, do you have something that identifies optional parameters versus required parameters?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to get into that. It's a lot, but yes.
Okay.
So optional parameters can be default values can all be there.
Okay.
So I think it's actually possible for us to generate code that actually can do. I didn't get to show some of the validation. We have really cool JSON validation custom functions. We think it'd be possible to someday write your documentation and generate not only the script parameter parsing, but validating all that too, right?
Hi. So when you call a card window to embed in another file,
yeah.
Are there any context situations that you have to, is it still like a context within a context or what?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is when card windows first came out, that was like the big win for me. It's like, oh my God, for the first time, it appears that we have two different contexts in the window, right? Because that window can have a different layout. In fact, you can change the layout without changing the background layout. So that was really sweet. But it's really just a window, right? And that's why it's locked there. That's why it's modal the way that it is. We still don't really have two contexts or more than one context in a window. You still have your base Your main window still has a table occurrence group that it's anchored to, and your little window has a context that it's anchored to as well. But it does give you that impression that there's two contexts there, which is really sweet.
So this is really cool, and a lot of cool stuff being built in FileMaker and card windows, that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of really cool development being done in web viewers with JavaScript and that kind of thing. How does that play into Modular FileMaker, and how can we distribute those types of innovations so that everybody can use them?
Yeah, so I've got another example, and I'll just open it for you. And so this is our GoDraw is a product, right? So this is just, it's a drawing app. You can scribble on FileMaker, move stuff around. So notice what we get here, right? That's a card window. Can you guys tell what's WebViewer and what's FileMaker there?
No, not at all.
Can you tell? No. Like, not really, right? So I'll give you a hint. The black border is FileMaker. Everything inside that big black border is a WebViewer, right? Running JavaScript code. But that is a card window from the other file. So we distribute it as a single file module that you can just use as a card window if you choose to. So that'll be one way. There will be some others because we have some other ways to distribute code like this because it's really just a giant text blob. So I expect that there might be a module type which is JavaScript WebViewer blob that gets shoved into a WebViewer and displays that. I think you could certainly do that. And I'd like to see that happen. I think that would be really cool. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded from what you said like you were planning to build V2 as a FileMaker-backed thing, and it sounded like you were planning to do version control and all of that sort of stuff in there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why you would choose to go down that route rather than taking the npm packages IP route and just using GitHub tags to create version numbers, and so that your FileMaker thing was just a reference library.
I'm not smart enough. No, actually, I did consider that. And I think that it's likely that the reality is the assets will be linked to as often as not to things like GitHub. And so that would be one way to do it. I think part of it is frankly showing off. I think we can build stuff like this in FileMaker now if we're smart about it. And I'm just tired of people saying that you can't do this with FileMaker. I just don't buy it. The other things we can do is we can build services that do external storage of large binaries, right? So that the FileMaker database would really only deal with the metadata around the project, and the file would be stored at GitHub or in some other service like Amazon S3. The world there's so many possibilities of using the services that are out there, and when you couple those with FileMaker, it works great. There's just not a reason not to do that. So, but I think in the short term, people are very familiar with FileMaker, and also in terms of how we roll it out, we're not gonna wait 3 years to do this. We're gonna start now, and we're gonna start building this and adding features to it. But I do kind of see a day where at least it will be optional that the database is really only storing where those files are and the metadata about them.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I like the modular file as an external file and the performance script. It would be awesome as like this. But when we want to host it on the server, which would also work fine. But how about the FileMaker Cloud, which doesn't allow us to auto-logging or the security terms? So modular file should be auto-logging as a default, or how we need to arrange for that?
I don't think there's an issue with AWS because we're not installing anything on the server yet.
I mean, FileMaker Cloud doesn't allow us as a guest.
So the API is designed, by the way, there's an API. So you could write your own MFM tool if you want. We have a publish API that'll let you scan the repo for latest versions, even publish eventually. Copy a bunch of scripts to a clipboard, fill out a form, publish it to the repository, all part of what MFM should be able to do with that API. So the APIs that need to be public, those endpoints that need to be public, have a default password stored on the server. And they use that to communicate to the FileMaker server. So there's no need to log in. When you're a module author, when you are logging in to put up your own modules, then you will need to log in to do that. Yes, that's correct. But when you're consuming them, when you just want to be able to search, find, and download, no login. Just be able to call those APIs and pull down the files. Does that answer the question? Woo!